All right. Greetings and welcome to another episode of the Unnamed Bracketology podcast. My name is Kerry Miller, joined as always by my good friend Graham Doran. We made it a whole 14 episodes before one of us was too sick to do it in person. I have a 5-year-old daughter. Graham has two kids under five. It was bound to happen eventually. If you can't already tell, I am the sick one. So let's see how this flu game goes. But we're gonna just kind of go through the whiteboard, the magical whiteboard that goes viral every couple of days. I'll start with just a general question for you, Graham. Is there any one team in particular that you definitely think we need to talk about?
Yeah, the team that stood out to me was Texas being on the bubble.
Okay. Okay. All right, we'll get there. But I'm excited because I do think Texas is going to be the by selection Sunday. I think they have like the just the weirdest, it's going to be the most controversial resume, whether they get in or not. It's going to be right up there with, NC State and Syracuse and Notre Dame from years past. But let's go league by league. We'll start in the ACC, and we'll start with a Q&A from Twitter from Bowertology, and he probably asked the best question of them all. And if it's Syracuse's resume average that's keeping them alive, so Syracuse I still have on the bubble. Don't know how visible the whiteboard actually is behind me, but if Syracuse's resume average is keeping them alive, why are they two categories above Princeton, who is in the not dead yet category? I don't know if that's a knock on Syracuse being too high, a knock on Princeton being too low, a little bit of both. Do you have any thoughts on either of those teams?
It's really interesting that we got this question today because right before we got the question, I was looking at Princeton's resume just to make sure I wasn't missing anything with them because it had been a while since I looked at their at-large chances again.
Yeah,
And it just really confirmed what I had already thought, which is great resume, nice record against quad one slash quad two. But when you look at everything, you come to the conclusion they just don't have the quality wins that will get them into the field. And that Rutgers neutral site game is really the best thing they have to offer. That's not Q1. That's not even Q2A. That's a
right.
Q2 victory. Like they don't have anything even remotely close to being a marquee victory. And I think that's it's going to be enough to keep Princeton out of the field if they end up needing the at large. Because if they were in a scenario where they went out through the Ivy League tournament and we're evaluating whether they're at large worthy, okay, maybe there's a case. But in this scenario, we know they're losing at least one more game. So I just don't see any shot for Princeton other than just absolute chaos throughout the entire bubble.
Oh, that never happens. But yeah, I agree. I think they, even though I have them as not dead yet, it feels like they are dead because, like you said, they don't even have a Q2A win. They don't have a Q1 game. They went 0-3 against Q2A and undefeated everywhere else. I think it'd be a different story if they were undefeated, or excuse me, winless in Q1A and then had nothing but wins elsewhere. That's kind of what we were looking at with Samford for a little while. But yeah, I don't think there's much of a case for Princeton, and Syracuse is of all the teams that I have on the bubble. It's annoying because they're at the very top, so it looks like they're at the top. I think of all these teams, they are the furthest away from actually being in. I just happened to put them in that order alphabetically, but we'll get to them in a second. I don't think they're all that close though yet. UNC and Duke are locks. Clemson is in don't F it up. Do you think Clemson is close to a lock yet? I know that they still have like four tricky games remaining that could get ugly in a hurry.
They're so close to a lock that I was wondering whether they should be a lock right now. I
Yeah.
think they probably could afford to lose out and still make the tournament. It would be really close, though. So I agree. Don't F it up is probably the right category for them at this point. But if somebody said they're a lock, I wouldn't really argue that much either.
Yeah, I think probably of these teams, I'm closest on Clemson, like closer than Wisconsin, closer than Illinois. I guess Auburn should probably be a lock, but I don't know why I'm reluctant to put them in there yet. But Clemson's
Well, I
definitely in
guess
very good shape.
if everything went absolutely terrible for Clemson from here on out, the thing they still have are road wins at UNC and at Alabama. And it's not
Yeah.
like that's all they have either. So if they were truly that close to the bubble, they're going to be competing with teams that can't possibly compete with wins like that. So really, if somebody had them as a lock, I think that's fine. They're not missing the tournament.
Yeah, I moved them up to a 5 seed today. I had them as a 6 seed earlier in the week. I mean, yeah, it's very hard to imagine them falling out, but I am being very conservative with my locks. On the bubble, Virginia, we've been talking about Virginia, seems like nonstop for the past week. Took another, not a bad loss in resume, took an ugly loss at Virginia Tech. Which of those Virginia schools do you have higher at this point, Mr. Hokies alum?
I think Virginia is clearly in better position than Virginia Tech. I think Virginia is about 8 spots away from being at the bubble cut line in the safe side, and Virginia Tech's about 8 spots away from being on the bubble cut line from the outside. So
Yeah,
I definitely think Virginia is in a lot better shape as far as where they are now. But I do like the potential path for Virginia Tech to get to the tournament. They've got at Pitt this weekend. That's a Q1 game. Wake Forest just became a Q1 game. That's at home. The Hokies already have 4 wins against Quad One, so they could potentially be in really good shape for a bid if things break the right way. The downside to that is they do have some teams that are fluctuating in between Quad One and Quad
yeah,
Two, kind of depending on the day. And I think both the Wake Forest and Pitt games could potentially, depending on how results go, maybe move into Quad Two. But even then, I think that Iowa State neutral court game really does carry a lot of weight. So Virginia Tech and Iowa are in very similar positions to me.
hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. I think those are kindred spirits. Now, Wake Forest, you and I have been much different on Wake Forest. I don't know that I've had them in at any point in this season, but you've been close on them. Certainly their metrics. I just took, if you average all five, net, KPI, SOR, BPI, Ken Palm, they're at like 32. Every other team that has a five metric average of 40 or below is in, except for Wake Forest is at like 32 because they just don't have the wins. If Virginia Tech is 8 spots out, do you have Wake Forest 3 spots out? Where are you at with the Deacons?
I have them the first team out of the field. I think
Okay.
Wake Forest is right there, and it's just going to come down to do they win or do they not win? They've got Duke and Virginia Tech in these next two. If they go 0-2, that's it. If they go 2-0, they're in. If they go 1-1, it's going to be pretty close.
Yeah, I think I only jotted down my first four out, and they were not even among them. But I think they are close. I think they're closer than Virginia Tech. And then Syracuse, again, they're alphabetically at the top of that list. I don't think they're actually that close, but that win over North Carolina, what, 8, 10 days ago, certainly made things more interesting. I don't even know what Syracuse's remaining schedule is. I should probably apply the remaining schedule to this more so for determining who's close, who's not dead. But and then Pittsburgh kind of close, NC State not dead. I deleted Miami. I assume you have no problem with that.
No, and frankly, if you deleted NC State, I wouldn't have a problem with it at this point
Yeah,
either. The bubble and the ACC is too crowded, and I think NC State is too far out of that mix to get back further into it.
I agree. I think it's probably going to be a 5 bid league, and it's unlikely Pittsburgh or NC State get in. We'll see how it goes though. All right, Big 12. Houston, Kansas, Baylor, Iowa State, definitely locks. Texas Tech, Oklahoma, BYU. Any of them rising to a lock yet for you?
No, and frankly, I don't think it's like a one-win situation for any of them either. I think it's going to take multiple wins for all of those teams to lock up a bid. Really interested in Oklahoma in the don't F it up category because I think they should be fine. That's where I would have Oklahoma at this point. I think Oklahoma's closing schedule is really scary. It could turn
Hmm.
nasty for Oklahoma very quickly, and all of a sudden they'd be looking at a mediocre record, not a ton of great wins, couple great wins, but not a ton considering they were in the Big 12. I think Oklahoma's a little bit closer to danger territory than their seed would indicate.
Yeah, I could definitely move Oklahoma. I have them actually 1 spot behind South Carolina right now, and I have South Carolina and should be fine. That doesn't necessarily line up all the time. Sometimes it's based on, how difficult the schedule is, although I don't always look at that. I'll probably move Oklahoma to should be fine after this. but they're definitely behind Texas Tech and BYU for now. TCU, do you think they still should be fine? Should they be on the bubble?
And I think that's the perfect category for TCU.
All right, now tell me about Texas. You want them to be should be fine? You want them to be don't F it up? Where are you at?
Yeah, I think Texas is ahead of Oklahoma for me. I think they're
Oh
right next to
wow.
each other on the seed list. I have Texas as my last 7 seed, Oklahoma is my top 8 seed. So I
Hmm.
think they are really similar, and I think they should both be and should be fine. Texas has those really nice road wins, and they're not going away. And I think the other thing the Longhorns have done is they've avoided bad losses. When you take a resume that has avoided bad losses and has really nice road wins, that's always a formula for getting into the tournament.
Yeah. Excuse my puberty sickness voice crack. My hang up every time I'm trying to decide where to put Texas is they're 5-8 against Q1 and Q2. Um, and I believe you were the one that tweeted about the other night. Maybe it was JBR. I don't remember. But teams that are at least 2 games below 500 against Q1 through 3 never get in. And Texas is 10-9, and 3 of their Q3 wins are just barely Q3. Like they could be, all 3 of them could be Q4 in like a couple of days. So I feel like Texas still has some work to do. It, I do have them seated higher than a couple of my should be fine teams, but I feel like they still need to prove it.
Yeah, I feel like both Oklahoma and Texas should be fine because they're both well above the bubble fray right now, but they're both also in danger. So I feel like, yeah, they should be fine.
Yeah.
But if things go bad, they're going to go bad really fast.
Cincinnati, after the home loss to Oklahoma State, I already had them out. And at this point, they're like Virginia Tech, Syracuse out for me. Are you pretty much done with the Bearcats unless they pick up 2 great wins down the stretch, something like that?
I was just evaluating teams, and when I did it, I mentioned Virginia Tech is a lot like Iowa. I had those three together. Virginia Tech, Iowa, and Cincinnati, I think, are
Yeah.
all right in the same spot at this point.
Yeah, it got a little ugly for Cincinnati. We just got a question from Michael Gross. What is the position that Cincinnati and Texas A&M are in after their recent bad losses? I still think Texas A&M is in. I don't know about you. I know their result-based metrics are higher than any team that has ever gotten in, but man, as you pointed out, I guess it was on Sunday, is a 6-5 Q1 team really going to miss the cut? Man, and they got swept by Arkansas. They lost to Vanderbilt. Like it's definitely up there with that Arizona State team a couple of years ago that had, I think, 2 Q3 losses and a Q4 loss, but they had enough quad one wins that they ended up getting in as a first 4 team. I feel like that's where Texas A&M is going to be.
Yeah, I feel like for me right now, they're just out of the field. But I also have them in that position where it's just going to take one win either way, a win or a loss that's really going to swing them in either direction. So I think Texas A&M's in decent shape to make the field. They just got to win. That's it. They
Yeah.
are in that perfect bubble territory where they will control their own destiny, and it's totally up to them whether they get in or not.
Kansas State and UCF, I dropped both of them from kind of close to not dead yet. I feel like they are kind of dead, but I never want to move a team 2 buckets at once, just so I'm not overreacting too much. But there was another question from Alex Abley, Aebli. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing it. Which not dead yet team is most likely to sneak in on Selection Sunday? I mean, it probably is one of those two, right? Because they have all of the opportunities, but I I feel like all of the not dead yet teams are pretty much dead.
Let me throw you a different team,
Okay.
LSU. I think
Yes.
LSU is the team most likely to do it of that group. One, they're just playing good basketball, but
Yeah.
they also have a very easy closing stretch in the SEC, which is interesting because you'd think what they really need is good wins. But they actually already have some good wins. They just need a good record at this point. So if they can go 5-0 to finish the regular season, I actually think LSU could be that team sneaking into the field, and it's a totally reasonable path. It wouldn't take anything crazy for LSU to do that.
Yeah, I agree. And I thought about moving them up to kind of close after that game last night. Previously beat one at South Carolina, so now, very similar to Iowa. We're just out of nowhere. They've got two great wins. They do have more questionable losses than Iowa has. That's what held me back. But as I tweeted last night, they are less dead, but still kind of not dead yet. Um, Big East, UConn, Marquette, Creighton, locks. Nobody in the next two ranges, and then just bubble chaos. St. John's and Xavier have kind of shown themselves the door at this point. I think certainly Xavier at 13 and 13 overall. Um, what order do you have the other four in though right now? Butler, Providence, Seton Hall, and Villanova.
I have it Seton Hall, Providence, Butler, Villanova, and I gotta tell you, they're all really close.
Yeah.
I think the biggest question mark to me in that group is whether I would put Providence or Seton Hall top of the group. I think both of those teams are probably feeling pretty good, frankly. Like they're close to the cut line, but I think they also both have a little bit of wiggle room at this point. Whereas I feel like Butler and Villanova are truly right on that cut line.
Yeah. I think if I know Villanova still has a brutal schedule. They play at Connecticut. They have Creighton at home. I think they play at Seton Hall and maybe at Providence. I'm not sure. And then they have like one game against Georgetown in there. So I think they're just going to already with 11 losses. I think they're just going to pick up so many losses that they're not going to get in. So I have Villanova as my first team out, and then the other three are among my last five in. I think Providence is narrowly the best of the group. I still feel good about Butler because of those great road wins over Creighton and Marquette. Similar to like you were saying about Clemson, like man, if you got two really good quad 1A road wins, it's going to be hard to even penalize you, let alone leave you out.
Yeah,
Um,
I've
so
got Butler just barely hanging in the field,
yeah,
for that reason. I actually don't know that their total resume is worth being in the field, but those 2 wins stand out so much that I'm gonna need to see something really bad to drop them from the field because nobody else is gonna be able to compete with those wins.
yeah. I think certainly comparing them to other teams just outside right now, like Ole Miss is still, resume metric wise in the conversation, but what the hell have they actually done? Drake has that one great win over Nevada. That doesn't compare to wins at Creighton and at Marquette. So yeah, I think it's right now it is a separating factor, and we'll see how these last two or 3 weeks go in the Big East. Big Ten, Purdue is a lock. Wisconsin and Illinois, they're probably locks, but I'm reluctant to move either of them in. Which one do you have higher at this point? I think I have them at 17 and 18 respectively.
Yeah, I think Illinois is still just above Wisconsin, but it's really close. Um, Frankly, I don't think either of them are locks. I agree with you that they're in don't F it up territory. Illinois would have locked in it had they
Yeah.
beaten Penn State last
Yep.
night, but that leaves some question marks. So yeah, I think that's an appropriate category for both of those teams.
That was that was a major F up for a team in don't F it up, blowing a 14 point. I stopped paying attention to the game, and I noticed on Twitter everybody else was like, "What the hell happened?" We stopped watching it. That was wild. Where are we at here? Michigan State, Northwestern should be fine for both. I thought about dropping Michigan State back to the bubble after that loss to Iowa. Not a terrible loss, and I had Michigan State as my top seven seed before that, so I still feel like they should be fine. Where do you have the Spartans?
I agree. I have Michigan State as an 8 seed. I have Northwestern as a 9 seed. Northwestern might be bumping up depending on how they perform tonight, but I just feel like both of those teams are solidly in the field. They're not going to have great seeds in the tournament, but they're going to be solidly in the field, would be
Yeah.
my thought process at this point.
Then we have a question from Shy Sox fan 30. What's the tangible difference between Northwestern and Nebraska, where one is fine, one is on the bubble? Is it the Dayton win and non-conference strength of schedule? I mean, they both have a terrible non-conference strength of schedule. I think Northwestern's is actually worse than Nebraska's, but um, where do I have? I have Northwestern at 35, so a 9 seed, and then I have Nebraska at 39, so a 10 seed. Not again, it looks like a significant difference, but there's really not that much of a difference between them. Which one do you think is safer? And did Nebraska's win at Indiana last night do much of anything to move the needle for you?
I think it did move the needle. It helped get rid of one of the big concerns on their resume, which was the lack of road wins. But
Yeah,
now at Kansas State, at Indiana, neither of those are great wins, but they're both
right.
solid. Like, let's not minimize what it means to go into Bramlage or go into Assembly Hall. Like, those are still
Yeah,
decent
they
wins.
they beat the
So
shit out of Kansas State.
yeah, I mean, those are quality wins. So I think Nebraska did a lot for their resume, and now I think they're solidly in the field along with Northwestern. I do think Northwestern is a little bit ahead,
Yeah.
just because they've been better against the first two quadrants. And I think there's a lot of similarities with their two resumes at this point. But despite the loss to Chicago State, I think just Northwestern's done a little bit more against the top part of the bracket, and I think that will make a difference in seeding too.
A big part of it too, this is one spot where the remaining schedule came in for me, where Nebraska has like nothing but landmines left. None of their remaining games is really going to, I guess they play at Ohio State. That would be a little bit better than winning at Indiana, but nothing that's going to individually help them out all that much. But right now they are pretty well neck and neck, maybe one seed line apart. Iowa moves up to kind of close after wins over Wisconsin and wait, who else did they beat? Michigan State.
Michigan State.
Um, and then who was it? Steve Hicks. I can't even pronounce what his Twitter profile is, but asked, "Does the loser of Ohio State Minnesota fall off the board?" I actually looked at that. I don't think so because they both have opportunities remaining. Certainly Minnesota with only 9 losses. Maybe Ohio State would just because of the volume of losses, but do you think either of those teams is particularly close at all?
No, I don't. And I would say that I think the loser is not done. Like theoretically, it's possible, but let's not lose sight of Texas A&M or Virginia Tech from 2 years ago. Texas A&M had a tournament quality resume by the time Selection Sunday came around. The committee was already kind of done selecting teams at that point.
Hmm.
In Virginia Tech, they ended up beating in succession Clemson, Notre Dame, North Carolina, and Duke back to back to back to back to back. They had a
Yeah,
efficiency
and
metrics in
11.
the low 20s, and they still got an 11 seed. Like,
Yeah,
the committee doesn't move a whole lot at that point of the year. So, do I think they'd have enough to be in the tournament? Yeah, I think they could have enough. Do I think the committee would let them in at that point? Probably not. It
yeah,
probably just be too late at that point.
I agree. I probably will erase the loser at the end of the night, but we'll see. Well, in the morning because I'll be taking NyQuil pretty soon. Mountain Best, San Diego State, I have as a lock now. That was before their recent loss. It was after they beat again, I can never remember. They're basically all just trading homes and homes at this point, which is just a brilliant strategy. But San Diego State comfortably in, Utah State, don't F it up, New Mexico, Colorado State should be fine. Nevada, Boise State on the bubble. Do you have any qualms with any of the Mountain West?
I think Nevada and Boise State are both on the bubble, but they're kind of, straddling that line between should be fine and on the bubble.
Yeah.
I agree with the order here. I think it's all really where it should be.
All right. Yeah, I think I have both Nevada and Boise State as high 10 seeds right now. So yeah, getting close. And then UNLV not dead yet, although they're pretty much dead. SEC, Tennessee and Alabama, obviously locks. Auburn should be a lock, but I'm reluctant with the Tigers, just because they're where even is their resume? Are they still 2-5 against quad one? Like, please beat somebody other than
Three and
Alabama,
six
Auburn.
now after that
Yeah.
big home victory over Florida in overtime.
No, that was Alabama beat Florida in overtime.
Oh, I thought we were talking about Alabama. You're talking about
No,
Tennessee.
no, Auburn.
Oh, Auburn.
So Auburn's 2-6 against quad one. They don't have anything close to a bad loss, but that does kind of leave them. dangling if they were to take some bad losses. I don't know. There's no way they'll drop out, but again, I'm very conservative with my stone cold locks. Kentucky and Florida. I think I moved Florida one spot ahead of Kentucky again after last night's loss to LSU by Kentucky. Do you have them in the 6 seed range as well?
Exactly.
And I have South Carolina right behind them, but still in the should be fine bucket just because they have two good wins, two very questionable losses. I feel like if they were to fall apart down the stretch, and it's not just because they're South Carolina as opposed to being Kentucky, they just don't have that strong of a resume. Um, you know, trying to think of they don't have much insurance, I guess is what I'm trying to say. They only have two really good wins. On the bubble, Ole Miss, Mississippi State, Texas A&M. I guess at this point, Mississippi State is kind of clearly at the head of that pack, yeah.
Yeah, I think Ole Miss and Texas A&M are right about at the same level, and I could see the committee going either way with that, depending on what they choose to emphasize. Whereas I could definitely not see a scenario where they look at those three teams and come to any other conclusion than Mississippi State belongs at the top of the list.
Yeah, I agree. And man, Ole Miss is going to be such a mess, right? 0-5 against Quad 1A. No terrible losses though. It's so funny that they're Ole Miss and Texas A&M are like basically side by side when their resumes are so disparate. Uh, Nothing in common about them.
I think if it comes down to it, and they're still right next to each other, I think Texas A&M would probably be the one to get the benefit of the doubt there.
Hmm.
Uh, it comes down to Kerry. We've talked about this when you've got really great stuff on your resume and really bad stuff on your resume. The really good usually wins out. It's the
Yeah,
not doing anything that stands out positively. That's the thing that the committee usually never rewards.
yeah, I agree. You're better off having three great wins and four bad losses than none of either. Uh, Georgia, LSU. We already talked about LSU. Georgia's dead. I should probably erase them. They're not getting in. But yeah, LSU, they're kind of close to kind of close. Um, Pac-12 and other. Let's just do Pac-12 first. Arizona, obviously a lock. Could just about, no, I'm not going to say they could just about lock up a 1 seed, but if they beat Washington State tonight, that's going to really help their case. Washington State should be fine. Where do I even have Washington? Where do you have Washington State now? I think I
I
have them as
actually
an
have
eight
them in
seed.
my should be in category. So, yeah, you have them in should be fine. I could also see them in don't F it up, mainly because this Arizona loss isn't going to hurt that bad if they actually end up taking it. There's
Right.
not a whole lot that they can do to hurt themselves at this point.
Yeah, I have Washington State as an 8 seed now. And those are the only two Pac-12 teams in my opinion. And I think in most opinions, Utah and Colorado are still on the bubble. Certainly Utah still kind of close, based on what they did before league play, not based on what they've done the last 6 weeks. Good Lord. Do you still have them ahead of Colorado though?
I think Utah's definitely ahead of Colorado at this point,
Yeah.
mainly because Utah's got a little something that I can get behind. Colorado just doesn't have anything that stands out as being a tournament worthy team at this point.
But they beat up on Miami. That was so good at the time. And then Oregon is still kind of close, and I don't even know how true that is anymore. I might have to reevaluate Oregon to see if they're remotely in the conversation.
Metrics wise, they look like they should be in
Yeah.
the conversation. Quads wise, they look like they should be in the conversation. Then you actually look at what they've done, and they don't look like they should be in the conversation.
Well, they won at Washington State, right? And like for a while, we were like, okay, yeah, you swept the Washington schools. Those are barely quad one wins. Now that actually might be a quad 1A win with how good Washington State has been. But yeah, I don't think they're all that close. To the non-power seven, if we're counting the Mountain West, St. Mary's is the only don't F it up team at this point. I bumped Dayton down to should be fine after that loss to George Mason.
George Mason.
How far did you drop the Flyers after that one?
I have them as a 6 seed.
I do
And
too.
I think it's something where I could certainly see the committee giving them a 5 seed, but I just don't think they would. If you look at the quality wins that Dayton has, they're just okay. And I think this is a prototypical example of where the committee's going to say, "Yeah, let's take a look at those efficiency metrics." Because yeah, they beat a lot of teams, but they didn't stand out with their wins. Those efficiency metrics probably tell a better story of where we should be seeding them than their resume metrics. So I think a 6 seed is really the right spot for Dayton. Get some credit for keeping such a clean record overall, but at the
Yeah.
same time, don't over reward them when they haven't really beaten anybody to show they deserve to be higher up the bracket.
Yeah, their three best wins were against St. John's, Cincinnati, and SMU, none of whom are in the field right now, and probably none of whom will be in the field when all's said and done. Florida Atlantic also in the should be fine range. We had a question from CBBT bracket. What's the most realistic scenario where FAU misses the tournament? I don't even know what their schedule is, but they'll probably lose another quad four game because that's what they do.
I think with their 5 remaining regular season games, if they go 3-2, because they got a decent schedule. They get Memphis a couple times. They got
Yes,
SMU,
yeah,
Tulane. I think if they can go 3-2, they're probably okay. If they go 2-3, I think they're in real danger. I could say that if they fall in between either of those, where they go 3-2 but lose their first AAC game, or if they go 2-3 but make a run to the finals in the AAC tournament, I think that's where it'll get really interesting. But I think 3-2 probably fine, 2-3 probably in trouble.
yeah. If they get swept by Memphis but win the other three, that would be interesting.
I think
I
Memphis
guess,
would actually have a case to be
yeah,
back in the field at that point. I really do. I think Memphis, it's almost become a thing where they've gotten so bad compared to where we were that we forget they're still kind of in the conversation. They're
yeah,
not completely done.
yeah. They're still kind of close. On the bubble, Drake, Indiana State, Grand Canyon, Gonzaga. Do you have all of them in at this point, or who do you not have in from that group?
I have Drake just out of the field
Yeah.
because I have Indiana State as my auto qualifier, just because I think
Hmm.
they're going to land the 1 seed in the Missouri Valley. So I think we've talked about this before. I think Drake has the better shot at getting an at large than
Yeah.
Indiana State. So on the bubble is the right category for both of them. I could see certain scenarios where either of them get in. I see a lot of scenarios where they both get bubbles popped. But it could depend on what a lot of other teams on this board do, just to give them a little leeway or not. It's very similar to UNC Greensboro back in 2019 or Dayton back in 2022, where they were right there and they were in the field. They'd been voted into the field by the committee, but it was somebody else
Yeah.
taking a bit away from them that ultimately cost them a spot. I think both of those teams, Drake and Indiana State, could find themselves in a scenario where they are that team, and it just comes down to whether there's enough spots left or not.
Do you have Gonzaga in right now? They're my second to last team in.
I have them uncomfortably into the field. And what I mean by that is I have them as a 10 seed, and I don't feel good
Ooh.
about it. Like if you look at their resume, they shouldn't be that high. At the same time, they're Gonzaga, and they just won at Kentucky, and they have really nice efficiency metrics. That's a really tough team to seed if they get into the field. I could see the committee having them all over the place.
I remember there was one pod, maybe 5, 6, 7 ago, where I asked you who's the team that you have out that you think could get in. I believe you said Cincinnati. They were your first team out at the time. I said Gonzaga. You were like, "You're crazy, man." I was like, "I think
I thought they were
that
going to lose to Kentucky.
Oh, I thought so too. Um, kind of close. Memphis, Richmond, South Florida. Again, I will continue to go to bat for South Florida in that they are 18-1 in the last 19 games. They were breaking in a new head coach. I know they took two horrible quad four losses. If they continue to win and then they lose to like Florida Atlantic in the AAC championship, I think they will be very interesting. I think they will be more deserving than their resume says they are. And I think the committee will factor in that they just were not the same team the first 3 weeks of the season. I don't know.
No, I mean, will they have a resume that deserves being in the tournament? No. But will they be a team that you look at and you think, hmm? they actually did more than just showing up on that resume. Absolutely. So I don't think they're. I think they are kind of close at this point. I agree with you there. I don't like their at-large chances, but I don't think they're done
Yeah.
either. Like even, I don't think there's any way they can have a resume that looks like they should be in the field, but I think it will be close enough that the committee's going to have to really think about it if South Florida performs well from here on out.
Yeah. I looked back, they shot 24% from three during that 2-4 start to the season. They're shooting 40% since then. Like they were just breaking in new systems. I don't know. Maybe they'll just win the AAC tournament. It won't matter. And then not dead yet. I still have seven teams here. Princeton, SMU, James Madison, App State, Washington. I don't even know why I have them on there. McNeese State and San Francisco. Although I probably should have erased San Francisco after they lost to St. Mary's. I'll have to look at that one again. But any of those, probably, I would guess one of the Sun Belt teams that stands out to you, if any of them do, as possible teams that could get in.
Got to see what SMU does. I think they're the kind of team that's just hanging out there, and if
That,
they make a bit of a run, yeah, I
let's see.
could see
That
them
game's
being the
probably
team.
just about over. They're down nine midway through the second half. Maybe they can pull it
So, like I
off
was
at
saying,
Florida, though.
no SMU. SMU will not be in the conversation at that point. Then I think it would turn
Yeah, I
to App
think
State.
that they would be done if they lose.
I think App State has the fact that they beat JMU twice, and then yes, James Madison won on the road at Michigan State, but App State beat Auburn. That's just a
Yep,
better team than who James Madison beat. I think when it's that close, that head-to-head sweep would matter to the committee. So I think App State has a better shot.
I agree. All right, well, we will probably erase a whole lot of this over the weekend because that's how it goes. But enjoyed chatting with you as always. Gonna go take some NyQuil and maybe catch the end of this SMU game. But until next time, we'll see you guys on Sunday. Hopefully, we're both still alive.